Hello and welcome to this brand new Source Gaming discussion. I'm your host NantenJex, and joining me today is Dan.
Hello!
And Comrade from the Commonwealth Realm.
A pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So, I have brought Comrade and Dan here to discuss everything Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. The game is out now and we've been playing it, and we've all beaten the story and played through as the characters, and we just wanted to give our overall impressions on the game, and this will be include spoilers. We're going to start with our general impressions, but then we are going to deep dive into the spoilery stuff. So just be aware of that. If you end up listening past the point that we go openly into spoilers, well, that's not on us, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So let's just start then with something general. And why don't you go first, Comrade, as our guest? What were your overall thoughts on the story of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity?
I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised by the structure of this overall game. The usage of cutscenes, the voice direction, which is far better than it was in Breath of the Wild. I think especially the villains were able to shine in all of the scenes that they appeared in. So it made it you were just excited to get to the next point, to the next mission, to the next cutscene. And this is, like, in many ways, I would say that this is the first Zelda title that feels like it has movie potential. Because we finally see how a complete line of cutscenes of a story that is voiced by multiple characters has, and the big potential. And it also shows that it works to have a game even if Link does not speak. Which he obviously doesn't do in this game as well.
I agree with you on that fully. I think the cutscenes really do help tell this story, because it allows us to have like different perspectives than what we would usually get in a Zelda game. Like, it's actually a sort of thing that Link doesn't feel like the main character in this game because of how it's showing scenes from everyone's perspective at points. Like, you get a couple of scenes where the champions are talking amongst themselves and the like. And I think it really does help to make the story a much bigger focus, which is what I think they wanted to go for with this game. But what about you, Dan? What are your thoughts on your overall thoughts and impressions on the story here?
Before we can really do that, I think it's also important to openly acknowledge how good the game itself is. We kind of mentioned it in the preview discussion we did a few weeks back, but what a nice playing video game. The Warriors tropes are there, and they are for good reason, because they help to structure a game to a certain point. But what it does beyond is add flair of the characters that we haven't really seen in a Warriors game for a while. There were glimpses of it with a Persona 5 Scramble earlier in the year, which obviously nobody else played except me because it's only in Japanese. But the pure fact that we have a character interaction of Sedar, we have multiple different Y and X text per character per weapon, but also that even like the Sheikah Slate attacks all have their separate animations per character. When you, for example, talk about the later characters, and we'll talk about those in a while, those in particularly have like some unique ways of using the Sheikah Slates to their own moveset and applying them to the way that the characters are utilized. And that's such an interesting touch. But then at the flip side is that those characters work in tandem with the story. The way that gameplay and story works in tandem in this game is unbelievably well done. Because on the story side of things, you have a really structured story that goes from beginning to end and hits on the points in a very rapid succession. Like, every main chapter that you hit has a little story to go along with it and excels in telling you what is next in line, and you kind of have glimpses of what's coming up ahead. Even like the flavor text before these chapters tells you even little tiny bits more that you don't even get in like the main chapters of that game. Like, everything is designed to tell you a story that feels complete, and it's interesting contrast, particularly with Breath of the Wild, where it felt in moments that it felt disjointed. Well, here it's a far more structured and unique proposition that I just really enjoy.
No, I agree. Although I do have some complaints, I guess I want to say, about some of the fact that story can be told in the loading screens. There's one point in particular towards the end, which I'll probably bring up in the spoiler section, that I was kind of really wound up by, that it was explained in a loading screen and not in the game itself.
I guess so.
It just felt like it ruined some of the what was coming up. But I do agree with you. I think the gameplay and story integration here is done very well. And it's clear that they were built with each other in mind. Overall, on a story basis, I think this is very good. I had conflicted feelings at the end of it because I was like, this is probably one of the best stories I've seen in a Zelda game, but at the same time, I also know it's a story that not the Zelda community isn't going to get on or all behind because of some of the choices it makes. It was a very conflicting feeling to have.
Well, as the Zelda tuber here, I would say that first and foremost, if you're still watching and you haven't played the end of the main quest of Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity, please click away, because this is when the spoilers are coming in.
This is the point, because you kind of got an interlude. I think this is about the point where people have to stop listening in.
Yeah.
this is where you want to go and experience the game for yourself. Click, and the video will still be here. And yeah, this is your warning. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm just going to tell you we have a new timeline split in the Zelda series.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going to be having mixed feelings when it comes to this, especially the way it happens. Because this story is an very, and I have to highlight this, very happy ending. Literally, no one dies. Unlike the story of the Memories in Breath of the Wild, where everyone dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the best way of summing up this story and the conclusion as well. Because you think that there is this point in the game where you think, oh yeah, now it's going to get serious. It's time to start crying to some of these scenes. But it just takes a minute from that moment until things are going upwards and upwards and upwards. And there's no real point after that where you feel that we can lose.
Yeah, the second sort of Zelda gets her motivation back after they've left Hyrule Castle, it's all just like, you can tell everything's going to turn out fine. No one's going to win. Then the next levels, because you get a choice of 2, pretty much all confirm it at that point, because the second you start the missions is when the future champions show up. And the second they appear and help save their ancestors, you know that everyone's going to be okay by that point.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think that I minded a different direction. Because before we knew even the events of Chapter 1, which kinda alluded to this particular fact that there was a change in timeline, I don't think I particularly minded that. Because here's the thing, I had this long expectation the moment the game was announced, that we would get a very sad end and know how this game would come to an end. The fact that we didn't see it coming until that demo was released. The fact that they completely changed our expectations with the game is honestly a very big positive about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't remove the characterization or elements that you saw in that original timeline. It just added more to the world, and at the same time, we got to see a different side of these characters that we really haven't seen before. No matter if it's from the current characters in that timeline or from the future champions. We saw them far more shine than the original game, which I think is a major plus in my book.
Yeah, I agree. The whole new story element is very positive in the sense that we have a complete story. The thing is that the story in Breath of the Wild, many felt like, oh, we need a prequel because it was so fragmented and you could easily collect cutscenes in not the right order, which could easily spoil some key moments. And I think it's good that we have 2 lines of games because it also offers plenty of opportunities for the future of the Zelda franchise. And that is probably the most important thing and legacy of this game. It is the fact that it dares to use time travel as a mean of storytelling, of telling straight out that Terraca went back in time, but it didn't go back to its own time. It went back in time by creating a new world. And the whole game is all about literally saving this world and avoiding the same outcome that happened. And obviously, yeah, I already used the name Terraco, but if you have finished the main quest, you already know that the little guardian is called Terraco. And the thing about the story here is that it already tells you from the very beginning, as Don mentioned, that you should expect something else. We see from the tapestry the two champions next to each other. Many would think, okay, two realities, but then you realize it makes perfect sense when the successors of the champions from the world of Ruin come over to this new world created by Terraco to buy some time for the champions before Link can make his way and fight the four blights.
Yeah, I agree. I think that tapestry is the sort of big show point for everyone that sort of gave everything away. Like, the second people started noticing there were two people on each of the champions, it was kind of a dead on each of the guardians. Sorry, not the champions. It was kind of a dead giveaway at that point that they were going to have the guardians come back, the future guardians, I should specify, come back in time and save everybody. There have been plenty of hints down to the start. I think for a lot of people, the big contention point at the moment is this game actually considered canon or not, and does that even matter? Because obviously the game was set up as being a prequel to Breath of the Wild. Well, no, it wasn't being set. Sorry, it was being set up as you can see what happened 100 years ago, but then the story's gone in a completely different direction. Where you, as Dan said, you're getting the characters and the characterization and all this. This is all still accurate. You're getting to see more of these characters that you really enjoyed in the first game, but the story is clearly not. It's leading into the next game. It's gone off and done its own thing. And so is this just even though it's a split timeline, is this canon? Will they reference this in Breath of the Wild 2 somehow, like with the future champions? When they return back to their own time, will they remember any of this happened? And does it really matter? Because as far as I'm concerned, it actually doesn't matter that much, because it's made a split timeline anyway, and Breath of the Wild isn't going to know. As far as Breath of the Wild 2 is concerned, the Calamity still happens, so...
Like, the best thing about Age of Calamity is that it doesn't change Breath of the Wild in any way, because this is a separate world. There's even in this loading screen after you're done with the main quest saying Splintered Worlds. When Terraco traveled back in time, pursued by the malice of the world of Ruin, a whole new world was created. And that means literally this world is separate from the other. It's just that they brought in characters from the other and the future of the other over to this new world to save the champions, because otherwise they would have perished before Link was able to get on board on the divine beasts and save the day. And then we also see...
I mean, you can see that conflict too, right? Because at some point, like, Sidon and Mytha are together, and at the end of a mission, there's a I hope we can work together in the future as well. And then Sidon looks like very sad at the side, knowing what's happened in his timeline. This is also what I think is a very good story point, because it confirms very easily to the player that this is in fact the Sidon you played with or loved in Breath of the Wild, and that he's really going through a lot of emotions on one side he's seeing his sister alive again, but on the other he knows that his real sister is not alive. And this is the paradox of this entire thing, because we're not playing as the same Link that we played as in Breath of the Wild. No.
Because this is a whole new world. All of these characters are not in Breath of the Wild. They have the same past up to the Battle of Hyrule Field, but then after that point, when Terraco comes in and starts changing things like raising the Sheikah Towers, adding the runes, you have Ganon with his malice taking over the Terraco of this world, you have to really keep your head in mind and think about, okay, what is in the world comes from the world of Ruin, and what has its origin from this new world. By doing that, the story of Age of Calamity is easy to follow and makes a lot of sense. For the most part, that now Breath of the Wild 2 can literally be any kind of story Nintendo wants it to be. Like, if they want to get rid of the Miser's Curse that was established in Skyward Sword, they're free to do that. And even if that ends the Zelda series in that part of the timeline, we still have the Age of Calamity timeline, which changed everything. Like the victory 100 years ago, the survival of the king, Zelda and Link not moving over 100 years, the survival of the champions, it changes everything between the two timeline branches.
Yeah, it would be pretty unique to get a Zelda game like Breath of the Wild, but set in the Hyrule of Age of Calamity, the one where nothing's fallen, so you can still go to all these towns and stuff as if it's Breath of the Wild. Because I don't think Breath of the Wild 2 is definitely going to be a sequel to Breath of the Wild 1, and it's still going to be set in the 100 years in the future, but there's the potential there to do new follow-ups in this non-destroying Hyrule. That will change up the way that the game feels, I think, for a lot of players who have played the other Breath of the Wild games. And I like that potential there. It's a good way to at least keep the story together while also being able to let the Zelda team do what they want, because I feel like the reason Breath of the Wild is kind of nowhere in the timeline in the first place is because they didn't want to restrict themselves to the previous stories, which I much prefer personally. Timeline is a big meme at this point, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bear's claw, right? If you introduce it, what are you going to do with it? If you keep it all secret, what would you do against the people like analyzing those facts? So there is not really a solid solution like creating that type of timeline, which is why I think they kept Breath of the Wild in particularly that kind of vague.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, the thing about Age of Calamity is that it offers more freedom for Breath of the Wild 2. Like, the team can do whatever they want. And even if they end the timeline right there, like create a perfect trilogy, Memories, Breath of the Wild, and sequel, then you can continue the Zelda timeline through the Age of Calamity timeline. And I think that is the best thing the Zelda team can do, because then, okay, we got rid of that branch, right? We ended the curse there, and then we just continue it through Age of Calamity, where Hyrule survived, but there's still a threat, and which will arise in the future in a brand new environment, say on the next Nintendo system, after the Switch is replaced, say in 2024, and the game comes out sometime in 2025, because it's going to take some time after Breath of the Wild 2 until we get the next big Zelda installment.
Yeah, I agree. They've opened themselves up for this possibility and to sort of do what they want next, continue that timeline from a different perspective than what they're currently doing with Breath of the Wild 2. And of course we need to see how Breath of the Wild 2 decides it's going to end, if it does end everything, or if it leaves room as well for future games. But the fact that they've got this possibility now is a good thing, in my opinion. I enjoy it. So I wanted to actually go back a few points and go back to the scene about Sidon and Mipha having their little chat, because I think that's perfectly encapsulates something I've really enjoyed in this story, and also a kind of funny, I don't want to call it a flaw, but a point of the story that I noticed after playing it. So the scenes with Sidon and Mipha, and you get similar ones with like Urbosa and Riju when you're defending Hyrule Field on Van Naburis. There are really good moments where the ancestors and the descendants can bond, and they get nice moments together. And this happens between champions as well, like the parts where Mipha and Daruk are sort of... Mipha's asking Daruk if he can train her, because she wants to get used to fighting different styles, and he's all for it. He wants a big training session with everybody. Like, there are these really nice moments between the characters who aren't Link, but it really highlights the fact that Link feels like a side character in this game. Like, from the second he gets the Master Sword, and you get that one mission where it's a timed mission where you have to protect Zelda and Emperor as they try and escape the map, he suddenly stops being required for any mission, pretty much until the end.
I mean, technically this is not... It's kind of harsh to say this. It's technically not Link's story this time around.
No, it's not.
Because Breath of the Wild was particularly Link's and Zelda's relationship and their story. What they're trying to do here is that the world itself and its characters within it are the story.
The thing about Age of Calamity is that the relationship between Link and Zelda, which takes literally almost all of the memories in Breath of the Wild to establish, happens already in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Like in Chapter 1, in the demo, you already have Link saving Zelda from that Guardian Beam. And then in Chapter 2, you see him saving Zelda multiple times. from the Yiga, and that is like this is the one thing I would like to point out, and that is that a lot of the moments and turning points that we saw in the memories have been recreated, but in a different setting in Age of Calamity. I recognize that a couple of times.
Even Zelda's Despair arc, which we saw clearly in the memories of Breath of the Wild, comes back in this game as well, but represented in a completely different outlook and way than it was in the original game.
The same sort of things still happen, but not in the same way that they happen. Zelda's unlocking her power to try and save Link isn't just against the one Guardian this time that's about to kill the weakened Link. It's while Link's battling for the four Ganon Blights all at once, which I have to say is very much up in the ante from what it was originally. Muso games like to go over the top with how they represent things, and that whole moment is
yeah, but I think that also has to do with the introduction of Aster, right?
Yeah.
We still don't know the complete backstory of Aster even after playing the game.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. It makes me wonder if they're going to do DLC like they did with Sia. Like, because Sia, Volga, and Wizro got that free DLC where they also got their own campaign that sort of explained them.
Yeah, so here's the thing, they might. But here's the thing, Aster completely changes the game by summoning all four Blights directly before Master Koga. And then that entire setup changes where he summons all of them to attack Link and the others.
Yeah.
So it was a very important moment, and it changed the way that how Zelda unlocked her powers. But it was a crucial moment none the wiser, because it was still the same type of dire situation like we had before. That's what we mean with kind of represented in a different way. Like, it's clearly not the same situation, and it has a far more... even at that time, it has more of a more positive outlook than anything else. But the way they represented it with it, it's equally as crucial, and it ensures that Zelda comes to the point where she needs to be.
Yeah, I feel like I know you said this is sort of everyone's story, but if there had to be one character in this game, I think it's Zelda. It seems to be Zelda's story. She's the one who goes through the big character arc, and there's the moment towards the end of the game when Terrako gets pretty much taken out after you fight him with Link, where Zelda's addressing all the other champions and the heroes. She's the focal point of all this. Link is just in the crowd with everybody else, and Zelda's the main one getting the big climactic speech, effectively.
Yeah,
I guess
she
Link
finishes off Calamity Ganon as well afterwards. So,
yeah.
It's obvious that this is a story of Zelda and the champions, plus their successors. Because let's remember, this Link of this timeline or world, he has no impact on the Link that we see in Breath of the Wild, the one who lost his memory and had to recollect everything, and still has to recollect because he just remembers the most basic stuff from his past.
I do like though that Link is still somewhat goofy in this one. Like it's not just a memory loss thing, that he was already like this. I think there's a scene really early on with Daruk when you first get him, where Impa and Zelda are having a conversation. Daruk and Link are like having an eating contest in the background with all the knights around Link cheering him on as he like shoves his face full of whatever it was. Like
bone meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Link loves food, and that is a personality he had also. In all of the iterations of Breath of the Wild that we've seen, memories and so on, and the whole emphasis on cooking as well in Breath of the Wild highlights that. So it's a very nice nod, especially since cooking works a little bit differently in Age of Calamity. It's more of a buff you just do. You don't have that quirky animation where you just sit in them.
Although you do still get, with the double-handed weapon, you still get to see Link eat as part of his animation stuff, which is funny. But yeah, this is definitely feels more like Zelda's story, and I think actually my favourite moment, just because of how cathartic it feels, is when you unlock what I dubbed Super Saiyan Zelda. When her powers go fully, because the tide of battle completely shifts. And while that mission actually struggled on, I beat that mission with everyone having like half a heart left. Like I was stressing out in that mission because I was like, Sidon was really weak and I just sort of left him to fight a Lionel, and Zelda was with Pura, and I was like, I want to fight with Zelda because of how strong she is, but one hit and she'll die. And I just had Link running around being like, alright, Link, level up so you get all your health back and then go fight this wind blight over here. And please don't get hit at all. I managed to pull through, but it was very stressful. But before that point, when Zelda unlocks all her powers and you fight the two blights all at once, it's just light arrows raining from the sky and massive balls of light just forming because you can basically have her float around and throw her powers everywhere. It's so fun to play as, and I think it's my favourite moment from the game.
The best way of describing Zelda after her awakening is divine and also queen. Like, the thing is, one nitpick I have with the story in Age of Calamity is how they dealt with King Rome. Because King Rome survives, obviously no one of the playable characters die, except for the bad guys, obviously. And I have to say, it's a little bit of a cop-out, especially since I felt like a conflict like this should have consequences. And I think if they left the king dead, it would have been better. I think that would have benefited the story more. It would have kept the weight and the consequences of the calamity, and that you can't bring everyone back just because you've been able to turn the tide. Because this, at the end of the day, this is a war story. You even hear the theme of the narrated sections are called War Chronicles, and they do a very good job with tricking you into thinking the king is dead, because Zelda starts narrating those after running away from Hyrule Castle. But it's obvious that they wanted to make a little twist. But I have to say, it's heartwarming when they meet each other once again. But I feel like after that speech Zelda gave at Fort Ateno after the battle there, I felt like she was ready to take reign over Hyrule. And she's also the person who leads the army to command towards retaking Hyrule Castle. Like, the king is just a side character there. So they could have easily had the same story, but with the king dead.
Well, by the time they go to Hyrule Castle, the king is already there. Like, the king returns in the Great Plateau mission.
Yeah, which is just before.
Which feels like a really odd ending to that mission, because it feels like you're exploring a bit more, and then all of a sudden the king comes back. You do see in the dialogue that, wait, is that? And then the cutscene happens with the king.
Yeah, no, that mission was strange because Impa sort of implies, oh, well, they can only be skilled warriors. If maybe could it be? But like, you go into the Temple of Time during that mission, and Rome's nowhere to be seen, and then he's suddenly there during the cutscene. Makes you leave again and then go back.
I will say this in defense of that king choice, though. We do establish that he gets that guardian shield that Zelda found. So they did solve that loophole. And I kind of saw it coming from that point onward that the king actually didn't die. But I do agree that it would have been better.
Yeah, same. The king could have been a fun optional character. Maybe even in his old man ghost form. Seeing as that's his weird gimmick is in this, he swaps between being the king and the old man. Which is...
Yeah.
I still don't... I sort of get what the gameplay aspect of this is. Like, you do it mid-combo and extend your combo, but it's also a very strange, unique action. Like, all the other characters make sense, and his is just a reference, and it makes me question why he's even doing it in the first place.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and that brings up also another point, and that is that... there are no consequences. Of course, you see Terraco sacrificing itself in order to create an opening towards Calamity Ganon and bringing him down, since literally they are one and the same. It's just that...
I did feel sad with Terraco, though. Like, after that battle against him, he does that song one more time, and it's so saddening to seeing then completely fade out of existence. Just like, man, okay.
Yeah, I liked that moment. I mean... I that's a really sad moment. I think it's a really good moment. I know post-game there's obviously all the moments to bring Terraco back, which I haven't actually done, so I haven't seen the cutscene that happens, but I know you two have.
Yeah.
But like, I don't necessarily mind this because it's post-game and it's optional. So I personally don't think it impacts the overall story, but I don't know, Conrad, did you have a different thought about that?
Well, I think that stories like, you have to respect the material that you're coming from, and also the expectation people had coming into this game. And that was that they expected struggle. They expected a true war. And that struggle is not really seen that much. Like, the closest we get to that is in the battle for the Kala. And when we see the soldiers saying, "Oh, we stand no chance," and so on. And then Robbie just saying, "No, I think someone is coming." And after that, there's no real moment of threat. And this game could have handled that in that sense. I understand that they wanted to have a happy ending and all that, but I still think that if there's one thing they should have changed, the king should have stayed dead. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think
by
I agree.
3 guardians, and even if they manage to retreat, come on, there are many more guardians in that place. They are going to get hunted down before they get to the Great Plateau.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're talking about issues with the story, I think there's one that I have. I was having a talk with a friend who's also played this game, and he brought up the fact that Terrako itself is really unexplained. Like, we know how Terrako came to be. Zelda made Terrako, but when you start really pulling back the layers and thinking about this, 5-year-old Zelda made a time machine that she then completely forgot about because the king put it in a box in her own study on a high shelf, and then she never remembered it was there for the rest of time. And considering how important Zelda realizes Terrako was, being something she made with her mother, being that, like, her comfort pet basically when after her mother died, and all that, the fact that she just completely forgot it existed is a weird plot hole. The fact that the king, you could sort of say, oh, well, she was young, she might fit, but the king himself, who was the one who put Terrako away, completely forgot it existed. And just also the fact that Terrako is a time machine is a really strange point that never gets explained.
There's a lot of convenience writing in this game.
Yeah.
It really does the things that, oh, I wish this could happen, and it does exactly that. Like, the perfect moment of describing this is with the Zelda's breaking point in this game. Like, the same breaking point that we had in that forest. When she cries that she lost everyone. That is what happens after they run away from the castle. And then you see that teardrop falling down on Terrako, and you see the champions of the successors of the champions of the other world coming in. And it's the way it's happening with that tear. Come on, do you really have to do it that way? It's so cliche.
Yeah, it very much is, and then Terrako just solves the problem by bringing more characters from the future to the past to solve everything. I agree, there are a lot of... Terrako is a... I'm trying to think what the right word is for this. It's not.
He's a MacGuffin. A
MacGuffin, that's it. He's a MacGuffin that solves every single problem that the characters have. Because it'd be one thing if they managed to tell them, that the Calamity was happening and that allowed them to prepare for it. Because things obviously happen very differently in this. They never go to the Wisdom, the Fountain Wisdom Shrine. They go to the Courage one. We never see them go to the Power one, but I guess it's implied that they still do that off screen. But then they never go to the Wisdom Spring. And the Calamity just happens early instead. With them just leaving the castle.
Yeah, the key difference of the Calamity in Age of Calamity compared to the memories of Breath of the Wild is that the Calamity happens in Breath of the Wild's memories on Zelda's birthday. She loses everyone on her birthday. The worst birthday ever, absolutely. Even Link almost falls. While in Age of Calamity, the victory happens on her birthday, because the attack happens the eve before her birthday, and then the battle continues throughout the night, and the final battle happens. The Great Plateau happens during early morning. So she's reunited with her father. Perfect birthday present, by the way. And then they make their break during the late afternoon, evening, and retake the castle and kingdom before the end of her birthday.
So why do we think that it happened early? Like, I mean, the easy assumption is to say that Asta somehow got the Calamity start early, and Asta is the original villain. I mean, obviously, if you've watched and played this, then you know this already. But like, how do we think the Calamity started early? Because that's just one point that I don't understand why it would change.
Well,
the main
Aster,
characters never
you
took a
see,
thing for
Aster
it.
has his own evil MacGuffin, which he uses to bring the Harbinger closer to home and quicker to existence. That's the easier explanation, and hopefully, and I still hope for this. Like, we don't know that for sure because they haven't announced it. You usually would announce it by this point in time. That there would be like maybe an additional story later that focuses on Aster, but they really haven't said anything about that. And I wonder if they want to explore it at some point, if they want to look into that deeper, because honestly, that would make a whole lot of sense. Because we still have a bunch of questions, and unanswered questions around that regard.
Yeah, I mean, how long was it after Hyrule Warriors came out that they confirmed Seer and stuff would be coming? Like, it wasn't that much longer after the Japanese release, but I feel like it at least was like a couple weeks.
I think it was like a month and a half.
So, I mean, we could see in whatever direct happens next, maybe that's when they'll announce it. Because I do feel like Asta and Soga, and maybe even the Harbinger Ganon, are all potential playable characters that already have movesets and are in the game. I know people want Robbie and Pura.
Well, here's the thing with Robbie. We don't have a model of him.
Yeah, we do.
Well, we don't have a model in game of him.
No, there is. The Akala Citadel, he's there. He protects it.
But he doesn't move around all too much. The difference with Pura is that she actually attacks enemies in some of the missions that you come across her.
Does Robbie not attack? Because I was talking to my friend about that.
Not really. Robbie doesn't really attack in the missions that he is presented.
Because I was talking to my friend about this, and he asked me whether or not Robbie was, because we were speculating on this, and he said when he did the Akala Citadel, Robbie kept running up to that Malice Guardian and seemed like he was trying to do attack something with it, but obviously wasn't doing any damage because he doesn't have any.
Yeah, he doesn't attack for some reason. So I looked, by the way, while we were talking, and looked up when version 1.30 was released. That was the update where they added Sia as a playable character and the missions. That was about a month after launch.
Yeah. So we could potentially see, if they want to do it as free again, which they don't necessarily have to. It can be paid DLC, getting Asta and that lot. But we could potentially see it by the end of the year or the start of January. I think they definitely will, because I can't see them not doing DLC for this, and they're already there. It'd be very strange to not have them be playable. But hopefully it expands on it.
Yeah.
There's only one thing in regards to DLC and this game, and that is that we are in the Breath of the Wild universe. And the only playable characters you can really add at this point are Robbie, Pura, or Asta, because everyone else is there. You can't really add something beyond that, because it might also impact Breath of the Wild 2 later down the line, because we need to remember the two realities that coexist now.
I feel like that's not necessarily the case. I mean, DLC you could sort of pass off as being uncanon fan service, but the fact that they've made a second timeline, let's say, you've got people like Cass who are still going to exist in this timeline, who are non-combat.
Well, no, the Master of Cass.
The Master of Cass. But what I mean is, they brought the previous champions back to the past. They could just justify bringing characters like Pikango, Cass, Keaton, Beedle from the future to the past. And these characters that will still exist in the future because the Calamity happening doesn't affect their existence. I think they can still justify that.
I don't know.
It kind of depends, though. I think they would bring just more characters from that specific timeline in some sense. Like, I can see the Master of Cass, for example.
I feel
if bringing Pure to the focus of characters that could still be in here, I think so. Robbie, Pura, Aster, and maybe the Harbinger.
What about Soga? Everyone forgetting good old Yiga dual sword Soga, man. I actually really like Soka.
Those are the 5 characters that I think could be utmost in a DLC pack, because anything beyond that would create some additional paradoxes that I don't think they're ready for.
Yeah, I honestly don't think they're going to worry about it, and at most they'll say that the DLC like that won't come with story stuff and it was purely fan service. I feel like they'd be very wrong to not do Cass considering how popular he is.
Yeah, but I don't think they want per se that, you know? I don't think they want to delve too deeply into fan service. Like, honestly, I think they want to keep the characters contained for what is currently in the game, or a little bit beyond that, but I don't think they're going to go overhaul on that.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it's the Zelda team that decides what can go into this world and what's not. Obviously, they needed new villain characters, but they didn't overextend it. And they kept it rather conservative, I would say. Like, Calamity Ganon turned out to be in the Tarek of this world. We added Asta and Suga, who would be the top lackey of Koga. And that's literally it that you're adding. There are not many other characters that are being added in this game. And it's all about respect towards the source material, which is Breath of the Wild.
I think you could have a younger Pikango, seeing as he's a Sheikah as well, and he's an old man. Not as old as him, obviously, but they could still sort of justify him saying he's young. And I feel like Beedle is one of those characters like Tingle, where you can just say that he exists in all realities at all ages.
I mean, yeah, you can, but I don't think it really makes sense in the context they want to tell things.
Like, we have to remember one thing, and that is that Age of Calamity is set in one specific reality, and that is the Breath of the Wild reality, while Hyrule Warriors was more of Zelda overall. You had the different aspects: Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, Majora's Mask, original Legend of Zelda, mixing and mashing all possible timelines. While this is more grounded, and it's meant to be grounded as well. This is not meant to be Hyrule Warriors 2. It's meant to be an extension of the Breath of the Wild franchise, a new Breath of the Wild experience.
No, I agree with that. Absolutely.
I guess. I still think we'll get Cass now, but we'll have to see. I do fully agree with what you guys are saying.
We won't get... I will tell you this straight up. We can put $50 on this. You won't get Cass.
No more time travel.
You won't.
No more time travel.
You will absolutely for no time at all. I think ever will get Cass. At most, we will get the Master of Cass. That's a possibility, but I don't think we'll ever get Cass.
I don't think we're going to see more time travel in this game, even in DLC, because they know they stretched it. For the story purpose, obviously, adding the successors of the champions makes sense, because that is how, okay, you know what we're doing? We're building up these as the next champions in Breath of the Wild 2. And that's a good way of doing it, a very good way of doing it. But bringing in any other characters, it doesn't make sense.
Hey, 3 successors in Yunobo.
Leave Yunobo alone. He's trying his best.
He's getting better.
At least remember.
I mean, here's the funny part, right? I think for the most part, all the future champions are very fun to play as. The only one I prefer from the original champions overall is Urbosa, but like the rest of them, especially Teba, in comparison to Rivali, is really dang good.
Yeah, Taper's a fun one because I agree. I think his moveset is much better than Rivali's, and I think he's fun to play as. But he's also, like, in Breath of the Wild, he was the only champion whose name I didn't remember because he was that forgettable to me.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, that's totally fair, but as it comes to moveset-wise, I think Teba is fantastic.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that the most forgettable character ends up being, like, one of the funnest to play as in this game.
Yeah.
And I mean, it works. I actually remember who Tabor is now, and I'm hoping Breath of the Wild 2 will really allow him to shine and flesh him out a lot more. Because he's a fun character. True.
The thing about Teba is that we got to see Teba excel as a Rita warrior. We saw him being on equal almost with Rivali's skills. And that's what commands a lot of respect from him. Because we see he is a typical warrior. He has a lot of respect for... he calls Rivali master. and so on. And it's actually funny because I even got to see the champion with my own eyes, and then you see Rivali's response is just like,
Yeah. So what are you saying?
While secretly, Teba is a whole lot better than Rivali when it comes to actual movesets. I think my problem with Rivali's moveset is it's so disjointed. Like, it's because I'm very used to having the one style Warriors character. With him, it's like you have separate moves while he's in the air or he's on the ground, and you have to activate the air moves by holding down set R to make him flow about. Well, Teba is just immediate and doesn't need that character interaction and immediately floats up in the air while you're doing your moves.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. It does make Rivali's two separate movesets not feel very connected. Unlike, say, the King of Hyrule, who's also got a change in his thing, but you do that so just naturally as part of his combos. You just tap ZR as part of that. You can swap between everything.
Yeah. Considering we're already talking about characters, I would say my favorite like moving animation or like thing about this game is how Ryu moves around with Patricia.
Oh,
that's
so
fun
amazing.
moveset.
Her attacks are literally Patricia.
That's what I wanted from her. I was like, if the future champions are there, I really want Riju to use the sand seals in some way, and she did, and it's great. You just let Patricia go mad and pull you everywhere, and it destroys all the enemies around.
We got sand seal surfing, and it feels so good.
Yeah.
I also have to say I like Sidon, the way he moves and so on. It really makes me excited for what is in store for these characters in the sequel to Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I really like
sure.
Sidon a lot. Sidon and Teba were actually the two characters I took into the final battle with me, alongside Link and Zelda, because they were the two whose moveset I just preferred. Sidon's gimmick is really cool, where you just have to press the button at the right time to pull off a stronger attack. And I mean, man's running around with two tridents. Like, Mipha's just got one, and he's got her trident and then like a replica of her trident, which I guess could be his trident, and just dual wielding it, and it's great. I love it.
Absolutely. I think it's also funny that Yunobo uses the shield more than Daruk actually does.
Yeah, Daruk's protection is Yunobu's gimmick and not Daruk's gimmick.
Well, he is more defensive than Daruk. Daruk is just going straight for it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
It's true.
That's absolutely true.
Crushing enemies with his special attacks and so on. It's the thing is, I think the characters are well balanced in this game. There are some that are obviously more enjoyable than others. And then there are characters I never wanted to play again, like Hestu.
I like Hestu. I do wish he was a better character, because You're right, I kind of stopped using him despite Hestu being like the character I really wanted the most out of anyone in the game. But I think I'd still go back and play Hestu as opposed to the Great Fairy, who I just do not like using.
I prefer actually the Great Fairy over Hestu.
The Great Fairy has like really good range because of how big she is, but I don't like the moveset.
I think my least favorite thing is using Link with a spear. I just can't play Link with a spear for the life of me. Love his two-handed weapon where you can press ZR, do like a very massive attack, and then regain health with X. That's so much fun. I love using the Master Sword, but for the life of me, I cannot use a spear with Link. It just really puts me off.
I didn't use the spear much.
Yeah, the spears were never attracted me. Like, when you got the Master Sword, you just upgraded the Master Sword, and then you had some heavy chunk of two-handed weapon that you just want to whack enemies with. Zelda, for me, Zelda felt like a secondary character in this. It felt like, okay, I bring her with me, but it's not her I'm going to be primarily playing as. I'm going to command her to some other enemy, and then I'm going to switch to her. Finish that, and then move back to that other character. It does change after her awakening, but otherwise she feels like a lot of like a spamming character. She just spams runes for the most part. It's first after her awakening that I felt like, well, yeah, she's quite interesting in terms of the divine hand and the bow of light.
Isn't it funny? isn't it funny with Zelda pre-Awakening that the only combo I mostly use is pressing Y 3 times, pressing X, letting the bombs fall, and activating them?
I was going to say, that is her best move pre-Awakening. And I mean, I think that's a good connection of gameplay and story again, though. She's not a fighter, and in pre-thing, she's like support purely, fumbling around, throwing whatever runes out. And then the second she becomes awakened and sort of steps into that leadership role, she starts becoming a more proactive member of the player's troop. Like, I agree, Zelda was always on the side, and I didn't tend to use her much until she became awakened, and then I took her on every single mission and used her as, like, one of my primary units.
The character that always, in all of my missions, right from the get-go, was Impa. I think Impa was my favorite character to use overall.
Best girl, no doubt about that. Best girl, no doubt. Like, those attacks are ridiculous at times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They're great for taking down weak point things. Once you've got all 5 of her shadow clones or whatever around you, they're absolutely destructive.
Like, my most favorite thing, and this comes super late in the game because this is a late game combo that you have to unlock, is that in a late game combo, you will hop, you and your clones will hop on frogs and attack all of the enemies at the same time.
That's great. What's with the frog thing? I mean, I know it's a ninja thing, I know it's a Naruto thing, but that's a really random callback reference for the Zelda character they have. I don't remember
all
ever
of you
having an
riding
association
frogs
with
for like
frogs.
10 seconds and then immediately upgrading your special attack bar is like the best thing ever.
I really enjoyed Impa. I do actually think Impa's probably my favourite character in this. She's fast, she's got powerful moves, she's got destructive, her gimmick's pretty simple to use. The only thing about Impa I don't like is her weird warp, which I just pretty much never used. Like, when you're in the air and you press ZR.
I used it from time to time, but only in like very keen, specific moments.
See, I'd accidentally press it and then try and get out of it because I didn't want to use it.
Like Impa is just great both on the ground and in the air, and that is something you can't really say about the other characters because others don't really have air gameplay, while some have bad air gameplay. Well, Impa...
Rivali. I really want to like Rivali, and like in basic principle, he's not too bad, but like compared to most of the characters, he isn't as fluid as most of the other characters.
I think his aerial moveset is much better than his grounded moveset, and that's what I pretty much try to stick in all the time when I can. But some of his combos just bring him back down to the ground, and then you got to go through the whole problem of getting back up there again, and that just takes time, and it's not very intuitive.
I think the main issue is that they rely too heavily on his character interaction being able to fly back up.
You know what I found funny about Rivali is that he is the only character who is not mandatory to play in any missions.
Oh yeah, that's true.
because he's the boss of the Rito stage.
Yeah.
And you can go through this entire game, side quests. Eventually you have to upgrade him and play as him as well, but you can go through a lot of this game without playing a single time as Rivali.
That's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yeah, considering he's like one of the most popular champions.
Yeah, Link must be just like, fits me. He tried to kill me.
Yeah. Who wants to play as this arrogant?
Yeah.
You might think you're good, but I'm better.
Yeah, I mean, there are some side missions where you have to play as him, especially later on in the game before you can unlock Terraco, which, spoiler alert, is one of the final unlocks. There's actually a dedicated cutscene attached to him when you revive him. But one of the missions that you need to grind for Terraco parts is him and Teba in one mission together. And I think for 90% of the mission, I use Teba.
Poor Rivali being sidelined. I'll give Rivali this. Of all 4 divine beasts, his is the funnest to control.
Oh yeah, I agree.
That's true.
That's
true. Absolutely true.
Like, you get full free reign out of it. I really feel like the divine beasts were introduced very poorly in this game. Like, we've talked about it a few times. I know, Dan, we've talked about it was in the review. But the divine beasts are probably the weakest part of this game, and I think it really does come down to how they're introduced. Like, the first divine beast I played as was Daruk's, and it's just this set linear path, super enclosed off, where you're awkwardly trying to aim. And it didn't help that I had motion control aiming on with Daruk's, which I just really didn't enjoy at all. It was making me super inaccurate. And then Mipha's was like exactly the same thing. And that was also just super disappointing. Van Naburis was better because you had a bit more open space, but it's so slow that it just doesn't feel very fun to play as. It wasn't until I got to Rivali's one that I was actually like, I'm enjoying playing fighting in the Divine Beast for the first time.
If all the Divine Beast missions were Rivali's, I have 90% less problems with it.
Yeah. Like, I think the second Van Nabura story mission is better than the first ones. I actually think all of their second Divine Beasts, because they're all just more open areas. Well, I guess I guess Mipha's isn't, but that one's also painfully short. So
that's true.
Well, the thing about the Divine Beasts is that the problem isn't really about the main quest, because they serve a very important part of the story. They have some truly amazing cutscenes leading up to those Divine Beasts missions, which I think benefits them greatly. But the problem is when you have to do Divine Beast missions in side quests and post game, and that is where you really feel like this is getting old really quickly.
Yeah.
You should have just kept it in. But I will give you this: after you finish with the main quest, and when you decide to replay missions, you can just skip the Divine Beast sections altogether, and that's great.
Yeah, you can choose which section you want to jump to, whether you want to do Divine Beast or just do the Pure Warriors part of it, which was good. It made
that is nice about it, but yeah, I don't know. Even after playing them, I don't feel the need to ever replay them again.
I get that. So one thing I also wanted to bring up in this was actually more on the presentation side and the music specifically.
Okay.
Did anyone else get like goosebumps when the main Legend of Zelda theme kicks in after Link pulls the Master Sword for the first time and starts fighting Astor? Man. I thought that was so much fun, because I don't believe that song is in Breath of the Wild, is it?
No, it's not.
This game has one of the best soundtracks in the entire Zelda series, if you ask me. It's such well blended. The only problem I have with it is that they're reusing some tracks too much. You have a massive variety. Like when I went through the soundtrack list the other day, there's just so many tracks, but they resort to reusing the whimsical and a few other tracks over and over again. And I feel like that is the only weakness of the music, is that sometimes it could have been used better. In like there could be more than just one music that imposes threat, and not reusing that over and over again. But I have to say that in regards to the Master Sword, it's done so perfectly. The whole quest going through the Korok Forest, starting with clearing the monster bases surrounding the Lost Woods itself, then meeting Hestu and getting through all of these, introducing the Hollows, and then getting there with Asta, seeing Link being knocked out by all those Hollows. His sword breaks. Like it's a perfect callback to how weapons broke in Breath of the Wild. And then he's like, just kill her. And then you see this divine light, Link pulling the sword and immediately facing the Hollows and Asta. And I have to say, this is the best Master Sword pull in the entire Zelda series. And I will explain why. The reason why this is the best Master Sword pull in the entire Zelda series is because Master Sword pulls in Zelda are usually a very silent, distant experience. You don't have enemies surrounding you or anything. The closest we have been to this scenario was in the Wind Waker, where the Master Sword was kind of like a key, keeping the castle frozen, and then you had to defeat all the Dark Knights. But then I think this one was even better, because it was the drama build-up. You had Asta there, and then you pull the sword, target it towards Asta, and it's immediately straight into battle. And then you defeat Asta, and that's all. And that is like the perfect summary. And then you get the Master Sword galore in the mission afterwards with that timer, where you really get to get in tune with the Master Sword. And I felt like that was like perfect. This is just perfect of how to introduce and use the Master Sword in this mission and the mission right after.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, fully agree.
Yeah.
It's just so much fun. The whole mission's great, and everything after that's great. And, I mean, I basically exclusively use the Master Sword on Link from that point onwards. As much as I like the dual-handed moveset, the Master Sword is just so cool. In this, and it has the ranged attacks as well when you're at full health, which is a fun little nod. Yeah, that whole section is one of the top moments in this for me. A character I realised that we haven't really talked about at all is Koga, and the Yiga's whole thing in this, because I feel like one of the points that people I've been criticising a bit is how the Yiga clan kind of turns and joins Zelda's side, which I think makes sense in context. I think you've got that they wanted to be there with Calamity Ganon because they were like, Calamity Ganon's the stronger one, we could be like the rulers under Calamity Ganon, and then Astor's here killing like all of them and sacrificing them all to Ganon.
Well, the thing is, it's not this, they are on the side of the strongest. It's more, it's not the situation of King Bulblin from Twilight Princess. It's more of a situation where the Sheikah were betrayed by the Kingdom of Hyrule, and the Yiga are still angry at them. And you see, he's not doing it. He's not joining the Highlands of his free will. You can see he resists it when he does it at Fort Etano as well. He's like, but he accepts it in the end. And that is because we see this turn at the moment when our heroes, the warriors, break into the Yiga clan hideout, whoop the ass of Suga and Koga. And Suga's just like, we're done with this. But then you have Asta just saying, well, you wouldn't want to make an enemy of Calamity Ganon, right? And that's the thing. Okay, we're gonna stick because of that. But when you see them extracting the souls to revive the Blights, and talking about blood sacrifice and all that stuff, that's when you realize it makes perfect sense for them to leave Asta. It's a matter of surviving. A blood sacrifice for the Calamity.
Yeah.
See, you brought up no one dies in this game, you said, but Soga dies, and I'm very upset by that because I actually really like Soga.
Come on, off screen.
Yeah, off screen, I know, but it's still implied that he dies.
Yeah.
I actually really like.
But he's a villain. Come on, he's a villain.
Yeah, but he's a cool villain, and he could be a cool playable character. It's like, I know a lot of people were disappointed in Koga in Breath of the Wild because they wanted this sort of actual menacing villain, and he ended up being the more goofy one. But I feel like Soga is what a lot of people wanted Koga to be, and he's actually like really cool, and I like all the battles you have with him and the cutscenes you have with him.
That's true.
And then he just gets killed off screen, and and I was like, oh, that's disappointing. That's why I want him to be DLC. I hope it'll be DLC. Maybe they'll say that actually he managed to survive somehow, and we will get that full happy ending for them.
Nah, I don't think so. Like, I think Suga realized that, okay, we're not gonna win this. I know you want to protect me and join me, but you have to run now, Koga. It's as simple as that. Like, he was there to protect the life of Koga, and the turn happens because Koga is left alone. He only has his terrible Yiga foot soldiers, and he's afraid that Aster is going to come at any moment. But when he sees that Link and Zelda are able to oppose him, and thus Calamity Ganon, that he makes his turn. He's disguised as a Highland captain when he surrenders, literally, and says, all my forces are yours.
Well, they then just become comic relief for pretty much the rest of the rest of the game.
Let's get our sweet revenge.
Yeah, crying in the background when Zelda and the King reunite.
At least Master Koga is fun to play as, so there's at least that.
All of his movesets just when the Yiga foot soldiers just accidentally freeze him with his stasis, and then he gets launched into them. Is a great gag for a moveset. Yeah, and I also like it in the penultimate mission where all the descendants, all the descendants are meeting their ancestors and being like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll back you up." And Koga's just like, "Where's my reinforcements?" I want to see Koga and Hestu team up as the only two without any sort of partners.
That's also another point I
my.
would bring up as maybe a missed opportunity. I would have loved to see some interaction between Impa and Koga, seeing the Yiga and Sheikah once again together. Because that could have been a very big point that they could have made.
Yeah, it happens almost too late in the game for it to go on. But because I went into the next mission with Urbosa and Koga, there are some fun little just slight dialogue that gets brought up when you're like swapping between them and all that, between Urbosa and Koga, because of how much of a menace Koga was to the Gerudo. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
It's just, there's one thing where I think if you swap from Koga to Urbosa at one point, he's like, Urbosa, like very sort of timidly, because it's sort of weird for him to be on her side. And I thought that was kind of fun.
Well, he was shocked by her as well, so there's that.
Yeah.
I like this story. I like the story. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, like I said a thing very early on in this video, if it wasn't for the fact that this was sort of pitched as show this is what happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild, like if it didn't have that connection, I would be like perfectly fine saying this is one of the best Zelda stories. I think the fact that it is so tied to Breath of the Wild so much, and it completely goes off to make a split timeline and does all that, kind of leaves this weird impression where I understand why people are upset by it, and it does sort of it just hangs there over the story. This is a great story if it sort of stood alone on its own, but because it's tied to Breath of the Wild and changes things, doesn't change anything that happens in Breath of the Wild, but because it's not directly involved, it feels sort of like an AU cop-out, everyone's happy in the end ending.
It's wishful thinking, the Breath of the Wild game. Like, everything you were... And it feels like that a lot, because when our characters get into a pickle and get cornered, it's always just Terako coming in and literally saving the day. And it's cheap story writing. It's very cheap story writing. There's no real struggle. Like, the problem I have with the story, as based on the structure of the game, is that there is no real. The turning point is there, but it's very slow and very brief, and it doesn't really benefit the story. Like, there should be a downturn and say 1-2 missions where you feel like things are absolutely hopeless. There's no mission in Age of Calamity where I feel like things are completely hopeless. The closest we get is when the castle is taken over. But even there, I felt like, okay, we're still gonna make it out somehow, and there's still way. Like, there's no mission which really makes you feel dreadfully depressed in this game.
Yeah. I do think the Akala Citadel and at least the first half of the Hateno Fortress are very good tension-wise. Like, when they actually come up with the plan on how they're going to stop all of these Malice Guardians by luring them all onto the bridge and then destroying it and all this. And the game makes you sort of, everyone's stuck inside the Citadel. You're encouraged to not leave, even though I did send Daruk off to go take a fort up in the north because I wanted it. Like, everyone's stuck in the Citadel. You've got to guard that front gate and keep all the Hylian captains there safe while running around inside.
Yep.
Like, it really does create the atmosphere of a bunch of people all stuck in one place, surrounded on all sides. And so when you finally knock all those Guardians off the bridge with Robbie's plan, and there's the catharsism that you won not through pure brute strength, but by actually planning and pushing through an impossible situation. And I think the beginning of Hateno, before Zelda Awakens, also has a similar feeling to that, where everything's in absolute chaos. And I think I would be very curious if you went into that mission without having played Breath of the Wild, because obviously for the three of us who did, when you go into the Fort Hateno mission, you're like, yeah, okay, this is the moment where Link's meant to die and Zelda's meant to awaken. What are they going to do here? So there's this already pre-notion of what's going to happen. So I'd be very curious for someone, and if there's someone who's listening to this who didn't play Breath of the Wild but for some reason played this, let me know what you've...
I'm sure those people exist.
Let me know what you thought of when you were going into Fort Hateno at this moment, because I'm very curious to see if people had a different feeling about that stage beforehand. But the early parts of that, because you know something bad is going to happen, there is this tension hanging in the air about, okay, how are they going to do this? Are we going to have just a never-ending onslaught of Guardians and it will end when Link gets defeated, or will Zelda step in and save him? You get the player serve, which is what happens. You don't know.
Well, we knew that there wouldn't be an onslaught of Guardians, because right before you do Fort Ateno, you destroy all the Guardians coming in from Central Hyrule with Valna Boris. And then the champions come in and wash out, beam out, and crush the rest of the Guardians that might be heading that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I saw that cutscene after the conclusion of that mission, I knew, okay, Fort Ateno is not going to be this absolutely desperate, surrounded by Guardians experience. That there will be room for exploration. Like, you can go over to you start at the Dueling Peaks. You can go over to the other side of the breach of that peak, and there are collectibles there. And then you can run around a little bit, just exploring the fort. But I have to say that I knew going into that mission that Link wouldn't fall.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because I was already seeing it with big red letters that this is going to be a happy ending and we're going to defeat Calamity Ganon pretty much the same way we did in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, but I think knowing that this is that moment, it's thinking, how are they going to change this? What will happen? How will things be different from Breath of the Wild? I think just adds a bit of tension to it, in my opinion. So we've been talking for quite a bit, and I think we can start wrapping up the story point. But I thought it might be fun just to get some final random things out there. If we all have one moment we haven't spoken about yet that we really enjoyed, it can be anything from something really small to something really big, and something we didn't enjoy, same thing. We'll give one each and end it on that. So why don't we start with like the negative points? And I can go first as an example because it's actually something I highlighted earlier. I'm not a fan about how they explained who the Harbinger Ganon is and Terraco's name in a loading screen cutscene. Like, right as the final mission starts, before Terraco's been given a name, a loading thing pops up being like, the Harbinger Ganon is the Terraco from this timeline who's been infected from the Calamity and has now turned evil. And it's just like, oh, okay, so that explains that, and I also now know what the Guardian is called. Like, it feels really, and I don't feel like it was intentionally done. I think it's just an oversight because it just happens, and you're like, oh, right, okay, this is a strange way to explain this to the audience. And I didn't like that part, because up to that point I think those loading screen things have been fine as like little extra added detail and gameplay advice, and so it spoiled something for me which I wasn't happy about. So that's one random negative that I didn't like about this game. Dan, why don't you go next?
This has nothing to do with gameplay or story itself, but when you're on the map, you don't have full control or complete foresight on where you can find certain items. You will get an indication when you unlock it on the map, but you don't know, for example, if you need a certain enemy, how much of that certain enemy is going to be there, how effective it would be for your gathering missions, and that's what really annoys me. Like, I mostly did my gathering missions with most of the side missions on Central Hyrule, and when you enter certain missions, there might just be 2 of a certain enemy, while you need like 10 times the amount of like kills or certain items, and that's what really annoyed me. Like, by the end of the game, while I was trying for 100%, getting the need for certain objects becomes so irritating, because you have so many glowing points on the map that it can kind of become overwhelming where you need to go next to achieve what you need to achieve.
Yeah, that was annoying early on when doing stuff, so I can't imagine for the 100% how painful that must be.
Yeah.
Alright, and Comrade, the negative from you?
I would actually say the rescue missions of the Divine Beasts. And I don't mean the battles itself inside the Divine Beasts, but the fight up to them. I don't think that the level design was so inspired. It didn't... and this is a thing I think we've overlooked in our discussion, is how great the recreations of the different levels are. They tried to really recreate what was in Breath of the Wild, and that was the one stage where I felt like, this this doesn't fit. The environment and setting, and I know it's a mission just to get as quickly as possible to the Divine Beast, but the section leading up to the to when you got inside the Divine Beast, I just didn't feel anything.
That is true. I didn't enjoy the one with Rivali and Urbosa. Was it Tabantha? Is it Tabantha Frontier? Is that what it's called? That area? It's where the lightning's falling and you got the big hill, the big mushroom-shaped rocks. I didn't like that. You're right. I didn't like that mission. I am impressed with how many levels there are in this game, and the fact that the main story only repeats 1.5 of them, pretty much. Like Akala Citadel is done twice, and then there's Hyrule Castle, but the second time through it's like different parts of it are accessed. And I guess there's also the mission where you got Hyrule Field again, but it's only the central part of Hyrule Field, and then you have Hyrule Town at the top, as opposed to the post town at the bottom. But other than that, like every other level is completely unique. And I am looking forward to seeing the comparison videos between where people are just going to go across these paths in Breath of the Wild and be like, this is what it looks like here, this is what it looks like here, put them 1-to-1 next to each other. Like, I'm very curious to see how accurately they all match up, especially the really random areas like the Lanayru wetlands that I wouldn't have given a second thought about in actual Breath of the Wild. So it's now a point like of another positive to end this all off on, and I wanted to use this opportunity to bring up how cool Calamity Ganon is in this game. Like Calamity Ganon for me in Breath of the Wild was the worst version of Ganon in any game. I just didn't like the design. I didn't like what they'd done with it. It felt like a weird robotic mindless beast, and then the giant pig form was just really like a letdown for the final boss. This version of Calamity Ganon, in his Akuma-esque gigantic form, is super cool. And I know you can only go in and fight him with 4 people, but the cutscenes sort of imply that there's like 14 heroes here, all fighting Calamity Ganon at once, having to like dogpile him, and he's just throwing them around and jumping about and completely like turning the odds in his own favour. It's such a cool final boss. I really enjoyed it.
No, okay, I agree with that. Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite forms of Ganondorf now, and I'm curious to see what they'll do with Ganondorf and Calamity Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild 2, and if it can live up to this, or if they already have they already gone too far, and now they can't top it no matter what they do.
As comes to positives for me, like the sheer amount of side missions and the variety they offer has actually been really good. The map missions in original Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors felt kind of the same, a bit too much, where you have to defeat a certain amount of enemies, or it usually had a singular trait where you had to complete a map. Here it feels more robust. So even though you have like a certain amount of enemies you need to defeat, there is a harsh limit attached to it, and it actually feels really challenging to hit that time limit in time. There have been a few times where I just barely made it, and it's even like very respectful with your time, because if you press the retry button, it zaps you to the last in-between point where you complete like a certain section of that map. So you don't have to completely start from zero. So even though like there's a lot of things to do in that map, it kind of respects how you play around with it, and I don't really feel that was the same way with some of the other side missions in the previous Warriors games, where it gives you a concise amount of time, but even if you don't make it, you don't have to start right from the beginning again.
That's a very nice feature, because having especially if you're going for that 100% and you make like one little mistake, having to restart a whole like 20-minute mission again is not very fun. It's definitely
so there's one mission that leads up to the unlocking of Terraco, where you have to defeat like 5 different Lionels.
Okay.
And I finished that final part like 2 times, but it was very respectful. It's like, okay, you're still at the final part, go at it again.
Man, I actually don't like fighting Lionels in this game. I don't mind the big bosses, but Lionels are still like the worst enemy to fight. Rather take on the Guardians.
Yeah. How about you, Conrad?
I would actually like to highlight the stage in this sense, and it's Great Plateau. It's such a great recreation. How you start off and get to explore some of just seeing how everything looked before it was turned into ruins 100 years ago. You get to see the Abbey, you get to see the Temple of Time before the destruction. You get to see you get to go back to the Shrine of Resurrection and that point where we started our adventure in Breath of the Wild. And I was just like, oh my god, this is incredible. And there was a Korok waiting right there.
I saw that. I was like, I bet there's a Korok there.
I was just like, oh, I love this so much. And I have to say, the cutscenes there, it was okay, but I just felt like playing there was just such a joy. You had all kinds of enemies. You had Guardians, you had Lionels, you had Moblins. You didn't have... I think there was 1 or 2 Hinoxes there, actually.
Yeah, there's a Hinox boss fight that ends that level.
Exactly.
Right.
And then you had all kinds of different Guardians and so on. I just enjoy that stage through and through.
I
Like
agree.
a perfect fan service stage before you get to the 2 final battle stages.
Very good. Yeah, I agree.
No, it is a good showing for the Great Plateau. I liked it, and that was a stage I think everyone sort of saw coming. They knew that at some point you're going to have to fight on the Great Plateau. So how will they do it? And they did it well, I think. All right, we've been talking for like nearly an hour and a half now, so I think this is a good time to start to wrap everything up. So first of all, thank you very much, Conrad, for joining us on this.
Yeah, it was great.
Hopefully we can have some more Zelda-related discussions, or even anything else, to be honest, in the future. It'll be interesting to see how Nintendo supports this game going forward. And maybe we can revisit our DLC discussion when we have the first set announced.
If there will be DLC, that's the most important thing.
If there, I'd be very
the
surprised
question,
if they wouldn't, considering how I think popular the Hyrule Warriors DLC was, the first set.
I mean,
and how
that's
long
true.
they kept it going.
Yeah.
It also really depends how far away we are from Breath of the Wild 2.
That's
and when
true.
we want to start the marketing of that game.
I mean, it is Zelda's 35th anniversary next year, so this could be a thing to keep Zelda presence up until Breath of the Wild 2 dropping maybe at the end of the year? Maybe?
Yeah.
Something they can do.
Switch Pro.
Yeah.
Alright, and so I want to thank as well everyone for listening this long, especially if you stuck through it for the whole hour and a bit. Very much appreciated. If you let us know in the comments your thoughts on the game itself and the story. What parts did you really like? What parts did you not like? Who are your favourite characters? We want to know. We want to know. And as
want to know.
As always, to help us fight the calamity that is the YouTube algorithm, just like and subscribe and share with your friends, all of that jazz. Become our own champions, just like the people on the screen right now, who are our $5 plus patrons. You can support us by going to Patreon in the link below, but don't worry if you can't, it's not like an absolute requirement. Just knowing that you've enjoyed our content is enough for me. So, thank you all very much for listening, and always remember to return to the source.